Let's open with a word of prayer. Father, Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King, we just love you so much. We thank you for everything you're doing in our lives and in this world. And I pray, Lord, that you would give us ears to hear and hearts to understand what you're speaking in this time, this appointed time for us. And we just thank you in Yeshua's name. Amen. One of the things that I want to talk about is how our Shma project is going. Right now, we have got 6 continents, 13 countries, and 81 participants. The only continent we don't have is Antarctica, but I don't know if we'll get that. Now, watch this. I'm going to give you a little update here. There are some of the congregations right now. We have 26 of the 50 states already signed up. Including Puerto Rico and Hawaii. There's no reason we can't get Alaska. We have a lot of people in Alaska. We need to get Alaska. But even in Canada, we've got British Columbia, Alberta, Ontario, Quebec. We need to get Saskatchewan and Manitoba. But, as far as the United States, I think we're doing very well. I mean, it's only been like 2 weeks or something like that. So, what about Europe? Well, we have Belgium, and we have Germany, and we have France, and we have Italy. And then we also have South Africa, India, Australia, Taiwan, Singapore, and the Philippines. And if we get a little bit closer here in Australia, we have Western Australia, we have Tasmania, New South Wales, and South Australia has signed up, and another one in Tasmania. We just haven't got it listed yet. But so it's going very well in Australia. And then we even have Peru. I want to try to get some more in South America. But overall, I think we're doing pretty good. The other thing is, I wanted to get the Shma in as many languages as I could. I thought if the Shma, according to the Christians, that's what Jesus says was the greatest commandment, right? Well, if that's the greatest commandment, and if the Jews absolutely love it, and the Jews are scattered all over the world, well, then I think we should have a place where you could find the Shma in any language, in every language. So I went to the internet myself. I could not find the Shma in any language. You might find it in Hebrew and English, that's about it. So I said, I want to be able to have a website where anyone from any language, if this is the main verse, we need to have it available. And so, first off, we have it in Paleo Hebrew too. This isn't the best picture, but I wanted to have it in the Paleo Hebrew. So we also have Hebrew, obviously, and English. But look what else we have. We have Spanish, and we have it in Portuguese. We have it in French and German. We have it in Dutch and Swedish. We have it in Finnish and Italian, Slovenia and Romanian, Hungarian and Ukrainian, Haitian and in Greenland, 2 different languages in South Africa, Indonesian and Malaysian, Hindi and Chinese, Korean and Arabic. Now, to me, this is pretty exciting to have it in all these languages. People from different countries are sending it. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this in just a second as we're doing this, because it ties right into what I'm going to be speaking about. Let me see where I'm at here. So I'm going to go back to this here in just a minute. But the other thing I want to do is let you know about some coming events that are very important. Coming up next Monday night, Jeremy Gimpel. All right. How many of you were here the last time he spoke? Did you enjoy that? Incredible. So make sure, I think we have flyers back there. Pick up flyers, pass them around, let everybody know. And then, of course, August 13th and August 15th, that weekend, we'll have Lori Cardoza Moore here. And I don't know if that's the weekend of the Shma event. That's the big event. So we'll be, whilst he's here that Saturday morning, of course, we always do the Shma, but we're going to put a special emphasis on it. We'll give everyone an update of how all around the world people are going to be doing it with us that weekend. And it's going to be incredible. So make sure to invite your friends to that. Monday night, we'll be watching the video on Christianity and the Holocaust. It's about a 45-minute video. And then we're going to have a panel of some Jewish people up here after the video to answer any questions. So that Saturday morning, I'll be teaching on replacement theology. It'll be a special weekend. And Lori will be proclaiming justice to the nations and this whole concept. And then Monday night, we'll have the video about the Holocaust. And then we're going to have this panel discussion. And Charlie Schiffman, who is, well, he was, for 26 years, the executive vice president of the Jewish Federation. And he's going to come up from Portland just for this event to answer questions. And so it's going to be an incredible time. And then to be able to read the Shma, you know, all of us, I just think it's going to be incredible. So you want to be sure and be here for that. Let's see, then Labor Day weekend, we'll have the Paul Wilbur concert. And so that's going to be an awful lot of fun. And then we're going to have a Labor Day picnic the very next day. And then Monday night, we're going to have Rabbi Moshe and Leah here from Itamar. So that whole Labor Day weekend, for people that may even want to fly from out of town or out of state to come here for this, because that'll be an incredible weekend. And then, of course, right after that, what do we have? The Puyallup Fair. And then we have 3 weeks of the fair, and then right after that, we have the Feast of Trumpets, and we got Yom Kippur, and we got the Feast of Tabernacles. So it is going to be rocking and rolling from here through the end of October. Of course, then we're going to Israel, which is I think the next thing that I have. And where we'll be going is to Tel Dan. We'll start way up at the north. We'll go from Tel Dan to the Galilee, to Mount Gerizim, Hebron, Shiloh, Itamar, Elat, Dead Sea, Jerusalem. And so I just want to let people know if they can come, sign up as soon as possible. It's going to be an incredible, incredible time. Now, there's one other thing that I want to share with you. Wait till you see this. They're back there on this table. We've got I got 200 of them in, okay? We sold around, I don't know, 20 or 40 of them at the conference in Portland. And I don't know how many we have here, but there's more than enough. So you don't need to all mob Nancy right afterwards. But here's what I got. We have now, from Hebrew World, it's the Hebrew English transliterated Bible. Okay, this is the quote-unquote the Old Testament. Okay, it's not the New Testament, but it's the entire Tanakh. And what's really cool is this is done in cooperation with El Shaddai Ministries. Okay, El Shaddai Ministries' name is right on the disc, and when you load this into your computer, the little icons even say El Shaddai Ministries. And as a matter of fact, anyone who gets this, when they load it in the software into their computer, when they open up the software, if they click on El Shaddai Ministries, it takes you right to our website even. Now, this is pretty cool. Now, what is in this program are 3 different programs is on this one computer disk. So you load the computer disk into your computer, you download the whole thing, you take the disk out, and now it's on your desktop or laptop, right? You got there's 3 different icons that will be on your desktop. The first one here, this gives you an idea. You have the entire Hebrew here with all the vowel points. You have the transliteration, so you'll know how to say it. And then you have the English. And it's line by line, the entire Old Testament. This is going to help you learn Hebrew. The next version, what they do, they simply get rid of the transliteration so you can practice without the transliteration in front of you. That's a whole other program. Then they also have another one. And the third one, it's the same as this one. The only difference is the font looks a little bit different. And with this, you have all the freedom to copy and cut and paste into a Word document, which is really nice for those of you that like to, do your own studies and teachings. And that's not all. Get a load of this. There's well, what you have first off is 4,000 pages, line by line, Hebrew, English transliteration. You also get full search capabilities in both Hebrew and English. If you want to search for a word, it's Windows and Mac compatible. But here's the most incredible thing. Do you realize you also get an MP3 CD with the entire Old Testament narrated in Hebrew, 65 hours of recording. So you can listen to the whole thing in Hebrew. Like Brent was saying, you got to immerse yourself in it. You got to hear it. In this thing, you have 2 discs. One is your computer program. The other one is the MP3. So you can put the MP3 in and hear it while you're looking at it on the computer to hear the proper pronunciation. That is pretty cool. If you go to Hebrew World to get this, it's like $50, okay? And you don't get the link to El Shaddai either. But what El Shaddai does, we buy these in bulk, and so we get them at a discount, and we pass the discount on. We're not in this to make money, so we're making them available for $40, okay? Because, again, we just want to get this material out. But you can check it out, go to yourself. It's $50 if you're to go buy this, but because we get it at a discount, we just pass the savings on to you guys. So they are available here now. So at the break, if you want to, we do have them. But just know they'll be here every Monday night. So I just wanted you guys to be aware of that. Now, there's one more thing that I want to get into here before I get started. I talked about this at the conference, since we're talking about the Shma and how important the Shma is. There's some little jots and tittles in the Shma. You will notice, here is the phrase. Okay, can you guys read it? What is this? Shema Israel Eloheinu Adonai Echad, or Yehovah, or Yahweh, whatever. But this is what you have. Do you know these 2 letters are enlarged in every Torah scroll? Why are they enlarged? Well, the interesting thing is, these 2 letters put together form the word for witness, like the 2 witnesses. Okay, these are the witnesses. Now, faith comes by what? The ayin means I. In other words, this is also emphasizing faith does not come by sight. Faith comes by hearing. We need to hear. But you know what happens when you hear and obey? Then you begin to see. Okay? So sight is important. But if you really want to see what the Scriptures is saying, what do you need to do? Hear and obey. Now what's fascinating is the dalet is a door. Yeshua is the door. And you see the door, okay, Messiah, when you do what? Hear and obey. So it's just kind of interesting when you look at the Shema from just another way of looking at this. But what I'm going to talk about tonight now, in the time I have left, this is a book I've mentioned before, and I don't know how many we have back there, probably 5 or 6. You want to check? But it's by Daniel Gruber, and it's called The Separation of Church and Faith. It's kind of an interesting comment, the separation of church and faith. It's called Copernicus and the Jews. How many do we have back there, Nancy? 8. Okay, we've got about 8 of them back there. I don't even know how much they cost. But they're an incredible book. And I don't know if it was on our book list from the very beginning of this. But anyway, we have 8 of them. And I'm just going to kind of give you an introduction today because it's a very powerful book. It's, how do I say it? It's not an easy read per se. Maybe, but I guess it depends on you, whether it's an easy read or not an easy read. I love it. But anyway, what I like to do with everything is to break it down into simple context. What I'm going to do is I'm going to break down part of this book, make it very simple. And those of you that like a good read, it's a real good read. But I'm going to kind of go through it over the next few weeks when I have time, when it's my turn to do this. Because I think it is such a significant book, and I'm going to show you why. We're going to turn the world upside down here. All right? Okay, we're going to begin with this man here. Copernicus was born February 19th of 1473. He died May 24th of 1543. Now think about this. He was from 1473 to 1543. Do you realize what that means? Christopher Columbus, 1492. Martin Luther. Okay, I mean, I wanted to put you in the context of the day that he was in. They're trying to travel around the world and do all these things. Okay? Well, in the time of Copernicus, and this is just 500 years ago, guys, the earth, they believed, was the center of the universe. Everything, even the sun, everything revolved around the earth. As a matter of fact, this was not just a belief, this was an observable fact. They could see that everything, they were using their eyes, their sight. It's obvious everything revolved around the earth. Well, it so happens, historical Christianity believes everything revolves around the church. Okay? And be it the Catholics, the Baptists, the Methodists, the Lutheran, the Pentecostal, Episcopal, Presbyterian, they all take their places. They're the ones in the center, and everyone else revolves around them. And because of this, because historical Christianity has theologically defined themselves in opposition to or separate from the Jewish people, this is what they get. And just as Copernicus turned the whole world upside down when he said, guess what, guys, the earth isn't the center of the universe. Can you imagine what the church thinks when all of a sudden they realize they are not the center of the theological system? Talk about turning the world upside down. Well, that's what this book is about. He starts with the whole idea of Copernicus turning the world upside down, saying the world is not the center of the universe. And then he goes into Christianity and into the church. But our problem is we think that in our pride, we're at the center of the theological universe. So it's a very interesting book. And what I want to give you an idea. Here's where I want to go with this. How many of you know translators play a major role in determining what the audience will think the author is saying? When I go to Sweden, when I go to Germany, when I go to Switzerland and I speak and I have a translator, okay, it was different in Sweden than in Germany. Because in Sweden, I had a translator who knew Hebrew roots. In Germany, I had a translator who didn't know Hebrew roots. And so so that's going to make a huge difference as they translate what is going to be heard. But then at the same time, if the translator understands Hebrew roots, he has to know his audience. Does the audience understand Hebrew roots? Because even if you have a translator who understands Hebrew roots, he's got to communicate to them in a way that they can understand from their background. So the translator may have a different mindset than the author, or he may even have a different mindset than the audience. And so you can understand how translations can be so important. As a matter of fact, to give you a perfect example, I'm going to go into these different languages of the Shma, and I'm going to read you 2 emails that I got. Here you have these different people trying to translate the Shma in Hindi and one in Dutch. Okay? Now, let's say the person doesn't understand Hebrew roots, but they really want to get a right translation, and they're emailing me, what's the proper word? And maybe they do have a good understanding. But here's one example. This is on a Hindi translation, okay? And this is people who know Hindi, but they still went to Google Translator just to make it quick, just to get a quick translation in Google Translator. And they said, they put the English in the Google Translate, and they hit the Hindi button, okay? But then, just like Beatrice knows, when she tries to translate the feast DVDs into Spanish, well, Spanish may not be accurate. Well, here's what they said. They said, well, we went over the translation line by line, and the corrections we needed to make are in my green type below. I think we need to make one more correction. So they have it. And you know where it says when you lie down and when you rise up? They said, well, we had to change the word lie to lay because the translator thought it meant to speak a lie. Do you see how that Google Translator may be wrong in the whole concept of what you're trying to say? And then they said, and there was no translation for a frontlet between your eyes, for frontlet. So we put in the word sign. However, the person who knew Hindi said that, well, it's translated sign on your hand accurately, but then it translated wrongly for a sign between your eyes. It translated it as a signature between your eyes. And they said, we can change it to the same word as sign on your hand if you need us to, that's no problem. But in the Hebrew, the word sign on your hand and the frontlet between your eyes are two different Hebrew words. So should they be the same in Hindi or should they be different in Hindi? This was their question. And they said one of them, there's a Hindi word that says billboard. It should be a billboard between your eyes. I said, I like that. I like billboard. Okay. So, when they're trying to translate, what's the best translation? And then they said, also, there is no Hindi word for doorpost. So we had to choose either door or doorway. Which one, is better? They communicate different things. And then I've got another one here. This is from the Dutch translator. And it says, Dear Pastor Mark, Art, Vicky, all the members of the office, everyone here at El Shaddai, we heard about your project of reading the Shma on August 13th and 14th. We're from Holland, the Netherlands. But we are, as I'm writing this, we're in Jerusalem. And we're here since Wednesday last week, and we're enjoying the land of Israel immensely. And then it says the last Torah portion about Balak was the same day we visited the same area where Balak was. And then here's what he says. He says, we hear a lot from Pastor Mark. How many of you know that English isn't always the best translation? Well, we want to add Dutch isn't the best translation either. He said, therefore, we wanted to point out that the translation that is now on your website is of the latest Dutch Bible translation. He says, but there's a very big difference between this new translation and the old translation of the Dutch in 1951. It's the change of these two words. One word meant one thing, another word meant the other thing. He says in the English, that Dutch translation changes it from the words, it says, you shall put them as a sign. It changed it from you shall to you must. So what's the difference between you shall and you must? He says, well, as I understand the scripture, the Shema, it could also be a prophecy of great things to come, saying, and you shall love the Lord your God. So here the word shall means maybe you don't now, but you shall do it in the future. So how do you translate this? Which is the better translation? So you can see, even today, how difficult a translation can be when you're trying to translate something. Okay, well, most translations of the New Testament contain misrepresentations from a failure to recognize the original language and context. The translators translate as if they were dealing with a Greek text written in a Christian context. That's how they translated it. The Greek-speaking Jews who lived several hundred years before Jesus ever came had the Hebrew scriptures written in Greek. Okay? It's called the Septuagint. All right? So they had the Hebrew scriptures, the Torah, written in Greek, but it was not for the Greeks. Do you think the Greeks 200 years before Christ ever wanted to read the Torah in Greek? They could care less. Okay, so here it was written in Greek 200 years before Messiah ever came, but it was written to a Jewish audience. Even though it was written in Greek, it was written to a Jewish audience. So a Hebrew concept in a spiritual Jewish context had to be expressed in Greek. Okay, so how are we going to do that, the translators were thinking? Well, sometimes an equivalent word did not even exist because of the very different historical, cultural, and spiritual context. Okay? Just like words being created today for the computer that never existed before. Okay? Well, there are words, and many of you know that know other languages, there are some words that just don't make sense because there is no background, there is no context. The pagan Greeks did not believe in the God of Israel. 200 years before Messiah ever came, did the Greek pagans believe in the God of Israel? Absolutely not. So an existing Greek word had to be modified and used with a meaning that was significantly different from what it had been, or a whole new word had to be created. Are you following me? They had to take a word that meant one thing. If it was close, they would take it and give it another meaning. But it was only had to be understood in the Jewish concept. The Greek theologians claim the New Testament as Greek because it brings honor to Greece. But do you know the Greek linguists, the grammarians, and the lovers of classical Greek language say it's not Greek? Did you know that? They said it's and why are they saying that? First off, it's because they're protecting the Greek language. Just like the French purists want to protect the French language. You know what I'm talking about? The French, you're ruining the French language, quit it. Well, you have classical Greek and you have Koine Greek, right? Okay, the classical Greek, these are the Greek purists of the language. Then you have the common Greek, okay? And just like you ain't supposed to say ain't, the English people, you ain't supposed to say ain't, that's not even a word, that's bad English. Okay, well, this was going on back then. And the classical Greek people said the New Testament is horrible Greek grammar, horrible everything. Do you know for the first 5 centuries, for the first 500 years since Messiah, the Greeks did not consider the New Testament to be very good Greek. They didn't think it to be good Greek. It was more of a Jewish Greek. Why? Because they had all these words that no one knew that they had to coin. Just like megabytes. Oh, you see what I'm saying? That wasn't a Greek word. But now all of a sudden, the Bible has all these coined words which make horrible Greek sense. And I'm going to give you some examples here. How many of you have heard of the term Spanglish? I'm serious. You have Spanish and English and you come up with some Spanglish and words that don't make sense in either language. Well, that's how the classical Greek people saw the Greek of the New Testament. Christian theologians routinely claim that it was Koine Greek. Well, it was common Greek then. It was Koine Greek because they know it wasn't classical Greek. It's obvious. So they say, well, it was Koine Greek, common Greek, which is why the classicists didn't like it. But do you know the Greeks who spoke Koine Greek, they did not agree with the theologians. Let me give you some examples and show you why. Genesis chapter 2, verse 4. Okay? These are the generations of the heavens and the earth. Now, that's the King James Version. Now, what comes to your mind when you read that? These are the generations of the heavens and the earth. Okay? Watch the Young's literal translation. This is another English translation, but it's the Young's literal translation. Tell me if it doesn't create maybe a different thought. These are the births of the heavens and the earth. Did that create just a little bit different? It's like when it was born. I mean, it has just a little bit of different aspect than the word generations, doesn't it? Okay, Matthew chapter 1. We're going to go to the Greek here. Matthew chapter 1. It says, the book of the generations of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. You have here, the book is like Biblios, and generations is like Genesis. Okay, Biblios, Genesis, the book of the generations. Well, we know Genesis refers to what? In the beginning, right? I should have made it darker so you could see it a little more clearer. But right here is Genesis 2:4, and you're going to notice it's exactly the same. If you look, if you get your Septuagint or whatever, you can see it's the very same thing. Genesis 2:4, referring to the things being born. Okay? Well, here's the thing. You can look at Matthew 1:1 and say, see, it's in Greek, it was written in Greek. That's Greek language. Okay, but it's from a Hebrew mindset. Why did Matthew write it or why was it translated like this? What was Matthew's really concept? In other words, think of me speaking Swedish to someone, and I'm trying to relate an idea, but that person doesn't know the idea. Here's the idea. In Genesis 2, we're reading of the birth and the origins of the heavens and the earth, right? In Genesis 5:1 now, it says, this is the book of the generations of Adam. And if you'll notice, it's the same word, okay? Biblios, Genesis, the book of the generations, they say. But, so here it's really of the births of Adam, okay? Is more little translation. So what do we see here? In Genesis 2, here's what Matthew is trying to say. He's purposely connecting the dots to Genesis 2 and Genesis 5 because he wants to make a point. In Genesis 2, we're reading about the birth and the origin of the heavens and the earth, right? In Genesis 5, we're reading about the birth and the origin of man. Well, the intent of Matthew chapter 1, here's the very first few words from the Jewish-Greek context telling us what Matthew is really writing about. The very first verses of the New Testament starts out with, this is a book about a new origin. It's a book about a new Adam. So without the Jewish context, we miss Matthew's intended meaning. So theologians assume the fact that there are Greek letters, it means God has rejected and replaced the Hebrew world and the Jewish people. That's what happens. This is what happens. They see the Greek text, well then God must be done with the Hebrew people, the Jewish people, and so this is the mindset that comes in. The problem we have is Greek transliterations, and you know what I mean by a transliteration versus a translation? Does anyone not know what I mean? Because I'll explain it. The difference between a transliteration and a translation is this. For example, when Cain killed Abel, Seth was appointed to take Abel's place. Well, a transliteration is Seth. But a translation is to be appointed to. That's what his name meant. So a translation is you give the meaning of the name rather than just taking the phonics of the name and transliterating it. And I'm going to give you some examples here. Greek transliterations really are pointing to a Hebrew reality. Whenever you see a Greek transliteration, think about it. That tells you there's really a Hebrew reality behind it, and they couldn't find a Greek word for it. You following me? That's why they, like McDonald's. You go to Israel, you see McDonald's, they just have a mem and a cough and a dalet. I mean, they just transliterate the word McDonald's. There wasn't a Hebrew word for McDonald's. You following me? Transliterations, what they do, they create words without meaning. You take the name Yeshua, which means salvation, it becomes Jesus, transliterated into Greek, and then from the Greek it becomes Jesus in English, and you've lost the meaning. You have a transliteration of a transliteration of a Hebrew concept. So that's the difference between a transliteration and a translation. That's why you never see Jesus in the Old Testament, because you don't know his Old Testament name, and he's all through there. He's everywhere. Okay, so let me give you another good example here. Here is Matthew 1:18. Okay, it says, now the birth of Jesus Christ was on this wise, when as his mother Mary. Now I went into my Strong's Concordance on my computer, and I looked up the Greek word for Mary, and it's Maria. Of Hebrew origin, Maria or Miriam, the name of 6 Christian females. Now tell me this, did the mother of Jesus consider herself a Christian? Right here, you see this theology put into the Strong's Concordance. She was a Christian female. Now it says it's from Hebrew origin, and so we go to the Strong's number, and it's Miriam, which comes from 48:4005, which means to be rebellious. Now, Miriam is the name of 2 Israelitesses. Okay, so here Miriam is Jewish, but for some reason, the mother Mary becomes a Christian. It comes from the word Mary, which means bitterness or rebellion. So that's the difference between a translation and a transliteration. You can see why Joseph was concerned. Your name's rebellious from the beginning. How do I know if that's my child? But, so I just want you to see there's a huge difference in the transliterations versus translations. Let me give you another good example. In traditional Christian teaching, what does the word agape mean? What kind of love? Don't they have 4 different types of Greek words for love? Okay. God, is that God's type of love? Okay, well, let me ask you something. Could there really have been such a Greek word as agape? Okay, if it did, which god was it referring to? Zeus? Venus? Artemis? They had no clue of the God of Israel. They had no clue. They didn't know who the God of Israel was. So all of a sudden there's this Greek word agape, and Christians think it means God's love. That's not even what it means. But Christians took that and they run with it, and it's totally out of the context. It's a coined word. There was no such concept in the ancient Greek world as the unselfish love from the Yod He Vav He. They were pagans. That's why even Paul wrote to the unknown God, the one you're clueless about. To understand what agape means in relationship to God, you need to understand it in its Jewish Greek context. The context of a relationship with a definitely non-Greek God as well. So you have to go to the Jewish world from which the original concept came. And this is the problem with the translators of the New Testament, is because they were doing it from the wrong context. Get a load of this. Do you know that some people say in the Eskimo language there are 32 different kinds of snow? Did you know that? 32 different kinds of snow. Now, I want you to put yourself in this situation here and think about this for a minute. Try to translate these 32 different words for snow, okay, to people who live in the Sahara Desert who've never even seen or heard of snow. Now, I'm not talking about to someone who lives in Kansas who sees snow, but try to take 32 different words for snow and translate it for someone you're trying to communicate in the Sahara Desert who has never even seen snow. How would you even define the snow, the one snow you know, to someone in the Sahara Desert? Now, you're a translator trying to communicate something to Greek people of a God that they have no clue of. Do you see how hard it was going to be? Why you need to look at the New Testament from a Jewish Greek context, not just a Greek context. You miss everything. So how do you translate Hebrew words into a Greek world where they don't even have a clue of the original concepts, let alone the meanings? If you don't even have a concept of snow, how do you translate, let alone the meaning of snow, the whole concept of snow? Do you know the concept of a Messiah only exists in a Jewish context? Did the Greeks have any concept of a Messiah? So even the word Mashiach, which means to anoint, which is like to rub, the word Christ wasn't his last name. It wasn't Jesus Christ and Mary Christ and Joseph Christ, okay? And it really means to rub. And they would rub things, and they had a word for it, but you totally lose the meaning if you don't understand the context. Do you realize the Christ of the major creeds, the Christ of the major denominations and of the major creeds and the major statements of faith that you read of the Christian church is not even Jewish? Now, I'm going to say this again. I want you to listen to this real carefully. The Christ of the major statements of faith among Christian churches is not a Jewish Christ. Okay? Here's your Christ of the Christian churches. It is not a Jewish Christ. He is never identified in any way as a Jew in any of their creeds. You look at any Christian denomination, statement of faith, or creed, and see if you find anywhere that he was even Jewish, or had any connection to even Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob, or David even. Did you know there is no such thing in the Bible as the Old Testament or even the New Testament? Did you know that? There is no such thing in the Bible as an Old Testament or even the New Testament. These terms come from an English transliteration of a Latin mistranslation of a Greek quotation in a Hebrew text. I'll say that again. The Old Testament and the New Testament are terms that come from an English transliteration of a Latin mistranslation of a Greek quotation found from a Hebrew text. The context is covenants, not testaments. Do you know when the apostolic writings referred to the Old Covenant, they were not referring to the first 39 books of the Bible? And the New Covenant is not the last 27 books of the Bible. In James 1, oh man, can I get just a couple more minutes? I'll go faster now. In James 1, verse 10 and 11 is where it talks about man is like the flower of the grass. He passes away. He withers like the grass as the flower falls. The grace perishes. So shall the rich man fade away in his ways. Everyone's familiar with that verse. You know, that comes from Isaiah 40. That comes from Isaiah 40, verses 5 through 8, where it says, the grass withers, the flower fades, because the Spirit of the Lord blows upon it. Surely the people are as grass. The grass withers, the flower fades. But the word of our God shall stand forever. What stands forever? Is the Old Testament the word of God? So how can it be done away with? See, it's our culture, it's our context. It's a total misunderstanding. Luke 24:27, what are they using? Here, Yeshua is on the road to Emmaus with them. And it says, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he expounded to them all the scriptures concerning himself. How many of you know he did not have the King James Bible? What was he using? He was using the Tanakh. Luke 24:44 and 45 goes on to say, he said to them, these are what I told you while I was with you, that all things must be fulfilled which are written in the Torah, in the prophets, in the Psalms, the writings concerning me. So then he did what? He opened their eyes. Just like in the word Shma, he opened their eyes, okay, that they might understand the scriptures. 2 Timothy chapter 3, 15 through 17. He's speaking to Timothy, Paul is, and he says, from a child you've known the Holy Scriptures. And did Timothy have a King James? What scriptures, did he have a New Testament? Did he have a Gideon Bible? Okay. It says here, from a child you've known the Holy Scriptures, which are able to make you wise unto salvation through faith, not works, which is found in Messiah Yeshua. So do you know you can find salvation from the Torah by faith in Messiah? And then it says all Scripture is given by inspiration of God. The problem with Old Testament, New Testament thinking is it causes people to think the good news is incompatible with the Torah, the writings, and the prophets. Even the apostles use the Torah, the writings, and the prophets as the original source to proclaim the good news. So if the Torah, the law, the prophets, the writings was the original source to proclaim the good news, why would we think it's all done away with and all old and no good anymore? Can you understand? Can you see how stupid that is? You ever heard the phrase, yeah, but the Jews rejected the Messiah? Well, let me ask you something. Who told the Gentiles about the Messiah? Jews. Who turned the idolatrous first century world upside down? Jews. Who wrote the 27 books from Matthew to Revelation? Jews. In Acts 6:7, it says, the word of God increased, the number of the disciples multiplied in Jerusalem greatly, and a great company of the priests were obedient to the faith. Thousands and thousands and thousands of Jews. They did not reject the Messiah. They all believed in the Messiah. They're the ones that spread the good news. So the apostles, I'm going to really turn people's worlds upside down here. Did you know the apostles were not Christians? The apostles were Jews. And you know what? They were faithful Jews who served the King of the Jews. Amen. Thank you. A couple minutes over. So, we'll close with prayer. And no, we do have, I don't know how many of the interlinear computer New Testaments, but I recommend you get them. Let's stand. Father, we just thank you so much for your Torah, for your word, and I pray, Lord, that even though this message may turn many people here and on the internet upside down, Father, I pray that they would realize they're really being turned right side up. And Father, I just thank you for your word, and I pray, Lord, you would just plant this deep in all of our hearts. In Yeshua's name, amen. Thank you for studying with us today. If you have any questions regarding the material discussed, please contact me at my email address. It's pastormark@elshaddaiministries.us. Be blessed and shalom.